Good afternoon and welcome to the fourth webinar in the This Lead is Killing Us web series hosted by the Martin & Gale Press Health Professions Division Library at Nova Southeastern University. A few housekeeping things before we begin. First, the session is being recorded and will be posted on our website, which I will share in just a moment. During the presentation, please make sure to remain muted, and there will be time at the end for questions. Feel free to enter your questions or post comments into the chat box as you think of them, and we'll get to as many as possible during the Q&A session. This web series is based on the National Library of Medicine digital exhibit, This Lead is Killing Us, a history of citizens fighting lead poisoning in their communities. Guest curated by Dr. Richard Mizell from the University of Houston. The exhibit explores how citizens have confronted lead industries, housing authorities, and elected officials to protect their health against the dangers of lead poisoning. The goal of this companion web series is to raise awareness about lead poisoning and empower our communities to advocate for healthier places to live, learn, and work. We have created a website with a link to the free online exhibit, which includes images, photographs, and documents for you to explore. Our website also has a list of virtual events and resources. You can access the website by visiting lib.nova.edu/lead. On the virtual events page, you will find information for all the events in our web series, such as date, time, description, and link to register or join. Our next and final event is this Friday, November 5th at 2 p.m. On this page, you will also find recordings for all the past events once they've been posted. In the resources page, you will find information on lead, lead poisoning, environmental health topics, and environmental justice. We're very excited to welcome this afternoon's speaker, Dr. Josiah Alamu. Dr. Alamu is an associate professor of public health in the Dr. Kiransi Patel College of Osteopathic Medicine at Nova Southeastern University. He has studied at various locations globally, obtaining his diploma of public health and bachelor of pharmacy in Nigeria, his master's in public health in Honolulu, and his PhD in Iowa. Some of his past positions include being a lecturer at Gambia College, production pharmacist for AMC Pharmaceuticals in Nigeria, and being an environmental health officer for the Ministry of Health in Nigeria. He is currently a professor at both the graduate and undergraduate level, teaching courses in global health, environmental and occupational health, and integrated learning experience, but also has experience as head of department at the University of Illinois Springfield, teaching science of disease discovery, analytic epidemiology, infectious disease epidemiology, biostatistics, and emerging infectious diseases. He's an international researcher with peer-reviewed research publications in which he focused on trends of diarrhea morbidity in Ghana, well water quality in Liberia, the use of online technology to improve students' performance in epidemiology in Wisconsin, and the colonization of vancomycin-resistant Enterococcus and methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, etc. Dr. Alamu has an undying passion for the field of global health. He is currently the principal investigator for a project to conduct the prevalence of hepatitis C among the homeless in central Illinois. Also the principal investigator of a community-based project conducting the screening of hypertension and diabetes among rural Ghana, and co-principal investigator conducting water quality assessments in developing countries. While at the University of Illinois Springfield, Dr. Alamu led students and faculty on an outreach mission every summer to the Gambia from 2011 until 2018, when they took their mission to Ghana. Dr. Alamu wants to assume a vice chancellor position at a local university in Nigeria before he finally retires from academics. So now I will pass it over to Dr. Alamu. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. And Dr. Alamu, you're muted.
Okay, great. Yeah, I thank you so much, Daisy, for that, very long. If you see my face, it's like, wow. And I just want to say a big thank you, for the invitation that is extended to me by our own library here, to share my experience. And I want to thank everybody for taking their time. I know it's lunchtime right now. So listen to me. I promise you it's not going to be boring, okay? So I'll be talking about public health and lead in drinking water supplies in the United States. So everybody know that this is very, very important topic. So we will look at lead generally and its properties. I will talk very, very briefly about the route of exposure. How can we be exposed to lead? Then I will look generally about the impact on human health. Then we'll move on to lead in water. How does it get to water, drinking water source? Then we will look at two major water crises in the United States, Flint and Washington, D.C. Then we will talk about epidemiologic assessment. And please, if I'm running too much and you can't understand my tongue, Daisy, can you please slow me down? I get so excited when I'm talking too much, okay? So now, it's very important for us to understand the word lead, okay? Lead is given a symbol of P and B by the scientific community. And lead was discovered almost 3,500 BC during the metallurgic civilization, and it was so popularized by the Roman Empire. It's commonly found in the earth crust, and it comes in different forms, okay? You can find it as galena, which is lead sulfide, or cerussite, lead carbonate, and andesite, lead sulfate. Most of the lead that we are exposed to in drinking water, they are cerussite and andesite because they are the only two most soluble, lead form in water. All other form of lead are not soluble in water. So it's important to know that. So the scientific community are arranging all the elements in periodic table, and because of the atomic weight, the atomic number given to lead 82, and the atomic weight is about 207. So it's classified as heavy metal. And because of its, I would say, attractive properties, so it's corrosion resistant, it is very dense, it's ductile and malleable. You can actually hold it, you can bend it, you can make it to any form that you want. Because of such property, the human being has found its use in the past in so many areas. For example, in the cosmetics and warfare, we've used it in paints, we use it in plumbing pipe, gasoline, and pesticide, but currently is being found mostly in automobile industry and radiation shield. So that's where we find the use of lead. Unfortunately, there's a problem. Human beings are exposed to lead, and lead has no particular use in our body. So we are exposed to lead from several sources. We can get exposure from lead pipe for water supply, or even from lead paints. There are some buildings that were built a long time ago, they use the lead paint for them. They still contain lead in it, and people can still expose to that. Then lead in soil. One thing I want you to know is lead persists in soil forever, okay? And if you have a contamination in certain area, unless you remove the soil from that area, lead will persist in that area for some time into being. Then when we are still using lead in gasoline, we will have emission of lead in the air, and we're exposed to lead that way. Then in the mining and industrial area, there's exposure to lead. There are some use of lead in some ceramic or cans that people, that they used to, store food. Then we are exposed to it in some cosmetics. So these are the various ways by which we can be exposed, to lead. So when we're exposed to lead, there are some organs in the body that are most susceptible to lead because we can store lead in our body. Brain, in particular, the kidney, the cardiovascular, liver, the bone, and even in the blood. So we can find all these, in our body. But one good thing is lead can affect both adults and children, okay? But children under the age of 0 to 3 years are the most susceptible to the effect of lead. So, and it is very easy, it's very simple to figure out the reason why they are the most susceptible, because they have immaturity, blood-brain barrier. As an adult, our BBB has already developed. So, lead coming into the brain of adults is far, far impossible compared to, the children. And the children has what we call higher, gastro absorbance, so it can enter the gastrointestinal, when they ingest lead than adults. And children have hand-to-mouth behavior. Anything they touch, they want to put in their mouth. Because of that, they are also exposed to, to lead. But when they are exposed, and I will talk about that in the, in the subsequent slides, it has effect on their cognitive, development. So they have lower IQ scores, and they have behavioral problems, especially violent behavior, okay? And they become so hyperactive, and at times they can have seizure or impaired coordination. This is why lead is very, very important, and we need to look at it very well. The United States Environmental Protection Agency have a handbook where I actually took this from, that they document the effect of blood lead level and the adverse effect on human health. So if you have a 5 microgram per liter of lead in the blood, which is the CDC reference level, okay? So as you go up, let's say between 5 and 10, you can see there's developmental toxicity that happens. So there's a decreased IQ, impaired hearing, growth impairment, and all sorts of things like that. And the higher you go, the severe the effects of lead in the body. So for example, if we find that somebody has up to about 150 microgram per liter of lead, the person is gone forever. That's very, very toxic. So then, the question people normally ask, so what is the minimum exposure level that we're supposed to tolerate, the threshold? And the answer is 0. 0 micro level. Even at 5, there is still a problem. So we should achieve 0 level, which is probably impossible, at least for now. So now, a lot of people do, although I know we are not in maybe pathology class, but I still want to mention it anyway. Maybe you understand. When lead gets into the body, there are 2 main mechanisms that lead destroy the cells in the body. One, lead can destroy the antioxidant mechanism that the body is using to protect itself. Or 2, lead can increase the free radical elements that are detrimental to the cells in the body. So you just have to know that. I'm not going to go through all these, but very briefly, when lead gets into the body, they can replace some, ions in the body. For example, they can replace the calcium. They can replace, sodium and potassium, and they have effect on antioxidant defense system. And they produce this, what we call oxidative stress. And once there is oxidative stress, the protein, production in the body is affected, the lipid production is affected, and the DNA is damaged. So as a result of that, there is a cascade of effects in the body. And if you see here, this cascade that I'm talking about, they increase the oxidative process, they decrease the antioxidant. So they go to the liver and destroy the lipid, they cause lipid peroxidation and hepatic necrosis. Imagine the liver turned into something like a stone, something like that. And in the kidney, they can cause exacerbation that can lead to hypertension hyperuricemia, and increased creatinine and uric acid. Then the heart also, they can affect the heart rate. The heart can lead to hypertension, ischemia, or heart attack, and other things like that. So, and you can see the brain, they can lead to confusion. One thing I'm going to talk about later on is when lead gets into the bone, it stays in the bone for 10 years. You can't get rid of it less than 10 years. Whereas when lead gets into blood, you can get rid of lead in the blood within 30 days, okay? So that's very important to know. Now, because of all the problems that lead, caused in human health, the CDC or the government try to, formulate policies, to checkmate, the lead in the environment. And this is just the timeline that I really want my audience to know about, some of the policies. So in 1971, the United States government, enacted Lead-Based Paint Poisoning Prevention Act. At that particular time, they want people not to use the lead paint again. So they have a time period for people to change from lead-based paint to other paint. So that in 1978, there was a total ban on residential lead paint in 1978. So all houses built after 1978 do not have lead paint base. They do not. Because by that time, you can't even buy it in the market anymore. It's been banned, by law. So, but in 1973, the government phased out lead-based gasoline. Remember, the reason why they use lead in the gasoline is corrosion resistant, so that the engine can stay longer and healthier. That's why they add it to the gasoline in the first place. And when it's being burned, the less is emitted to the atmosphere. So the government banned it. Then in the 1986, there was a ban on lead in plumbing. Ban on lead in plumbing. So all the plumbing systems that are being in the United States prior to 1986 still has lead in them. But after 1986, if you lay new pipelines, you cannot use lead pipe, okay? Then there was, in 1988, Lead Contamination Control Act. Remember, as years pass by, we have advancements in scientific knowledge, and there are more evidences in the literature, the threshold that can affect human beings. As a result of that, the government also changes, the policy to meet the current evidence in the literature. And that's why we have it like that. So up to today, we have lead and soil hazard standard. So now the question now becomes, with all these policies in place, should we still have lead in the environment? Should we still be worried about lead in our water supply? The answer is yes. We are still worried. It's a silent epidemic that we must be aware of, and we must protect ourselves. So the CDC sets, a standard level in the country. And you can see the standard level that they set changes by decades based on the new evidence that comes from the literature. So in 1960 and 1970, the CDC allowed, the blood level of 60 microgram per DL. But gosh, now we know that that was wrong. How can you allow 60 micrograms? That's too much. So in 1970, when there were more evidence from the literature, they reduced it to 30 microgram per DL. Then in 1985 to 1990, they said 30 is too much. Let's reduce it to 25. I remember there was, when I was doing my PhD, there was a big controversial debate whether we should reduce it from 10 to 5 or whether we should just stay at 10. And so many scientists come together, through the task force, and they discovered that, lead is still very harmful, even at 10 microgram per DL. So they reduce it to 5. So the current threshold is 5 microgram per DL. But I can tell you from my personal experience, even at that 5, if a child is exposed consistently for, let's say, 5 years to 5 level, that child will have a cognitive problem. That I can tell you confidently. So what we should be striving for right now is 0, 0 in in the blood. So now let's jump to lead in water. But for me, I normally want to take people back so that I can tell you the history so you know why lead is in water and what is going on. In 1845, people here in the United States already know that lead is not good in water. As long as 1845, we're talking about centuries ago, okay? But in 1924, that was the first time a national survey was conducted in the United States to look at, the type of pipes that we have in the United States and what are they made of. And they found that the service line that contain, a lead were more prevalent in New England, Midwest, Montana, New York, and Oklahoma and Texas. So we're so lucky in Florida, to be honest, but we're not that lucky. I'm going to talk about that later. So now in 1990, another survey that they carried out showed that about 3.3 million lead service lines were in use again in Midwestern and Northeastern region of the United States. So from simple analogy, if we are looking at the effect of lead and developmental problem, if we go to these regions, they will be much higher than any other region in the United States. So now, a lot of people why do we now have lead in water? There are so many, several factors that influence lead in water and how lead gets into water. One of which is water chemistry. So the pH of the water, the acidity or the alkalinity of the water. So the optimal pH for which lead is not going to be seeping into the water is between 6 and 9. And when the pH of water is more or less than that, then lead can freely seep into the water, especially from lead pipe. Then the mineral types, like I told you, lead sulfate and lead carbonate are very, very soluble. So if you have any mineral that contains lead carbonate or lead sulfate, the lead will easily get into water from such area. Then the water temperature, if the water is warm, lead is more likely to enter the water. That's why when anybody is cooking at home, that's why we normally advise them to use the cold water, because you get less lead in your water than when you use hot water. When you are using hot water, it's more likely, for you to have more lead in your water, especially if your pipeline has, lead coatings or lead soda and something like that. Then the age of water in the distribution system also affects whether lead is going to get into water or not. Then the presence or absence of coatings in the pipe. So now the EPA has given us, an infographic of how lead got into the water. Lead can get in the water source, especially in the homes, through the faucet and through the service line, or through the, the lead soda. You see where they weld two pipes together with lead. Lead can seep in the water that way. So now, a lot of studies have been done to see whether there's a correlation between blood lead levels and water lead levels. And the US, Environmental Protection Agency in 1986 proposed these two formulas to predict the blood level, leads, if you know the water lead level in that area. So they said for children, if there is the blood level will be approximately 0.16 multiplied by the intake of lead from water. That is the amount of lead in the water. Then the adult is 0.06. You will see that the adult is a little bit less than that of children. But Pocock and his colleague in England, when they examined about 900 men, they saw a positive correlation, just like the US EPA did, but their own regression is totally different. So the blood level is predicted by the equation that you see there is 0.699 plus 0.003 multiplied by water lead level. So in 1976, there was a Safe Drinking Water Act that was passed, and they established enforceable standard of 15 microgram per liter, or you can say 15 parts per million per liter of water. But the unenforceable standard, that is the standard that we really desire, the goal, should be 0 microgram of lead per liter. Unfortunately, this MCLG is totally, for now, we are yet to achieve it, okay? So now in 1991, that's what we call lead and copper rule, LRC, and control measure that was put in place by the EPA. And the LCR set the action level at 15 parts per million of lead in 1 liter of first draw of water that is taken after water has been standing in a pipe for at least 6 hours. The good news about LRC is it enforced the water suppliers in the community to take samples of water from the customers' house at least 1 time annually. And once you see an increase of 10% that exceed this action level in the water supply that supplies about maybe 50,000 residents, then they have to stop the water supply to that area. Then they have to identify the source of the contamination and install corrosion control treatment. So that's why the LCR is very attractive, and we're still using it to today. Now I want to talk about 2 major water preventable crises in United States, which I believe everyone here, you read about it in the literature or you hear about it on the media. But before I go to the timeline, I just want you to know that what happened in Flint, Michigan was purely due to economic reason. It's not scientific. So Flint was the home to General Motors, if you know that. And Flint was doing so well economically in the 20s, actually after the World War, okay? And everybody goes to Flint, people are setting up car industry, and Flint was, booming, the industry was booming, economy was okay. But there was a downturn, I think that was maybe in the 90s, and all the car was folding up, okay? And so the Flint people cannot pay for the water supply again. And they went to bankruptcy in Flint, that the government, they have to declare the bankruptcy, and the Michigan state government have to appoint a caretaker for the city of Flint that took over work from the mayor at that particular time. And one of the things that the caretaker did was to create a committee to look at how to save costs in Flint. And one of the suggestions they give was to change their water source from Huron to Flint River, so that at least they will pay less for water. But it was a very big mistake. It was a big mistake because when they switch over, the water in Flint is more corrosive. And once they run it through the pipe, the corrosion led to leaching of lead into the pipe. And before anybody can even get it, They've done this for years. So it was in 2014 that people started, complaining about their water supply. And before you know it, there was this, cluster of skin diseases in Flint area. And people were complaining. And when they sent the scientists to that area, oh my goodness, the lead in the drinking water supply was so high that they have to close all the water pipes down. And it created a lot of controversy around the country. In fact, that time, I think President Obama was the president at the time, and a lot of people were calling for the head of the EPA. In fact, Ed rolled that time, okay? So now, it created an opportunity for the scientists to look at the elevation of lead in water supply and effect on children. So Anna, Atisha, and her colleagues, they went to the field and they surveyed all, Flint City. And they found that, the blood level of children rose from, like 2.4% to 4.9. Those who have like 5 microgram per liter before, the blood level went up. And the same thing, Edward also took 70% of water samples and tested them and found that that's 17%. In fact, about 90% of those samples were above the USDA standard of 15 microgram per liter. That's for you to see the effects of crisis. Then this is preventable. It's preventable because there is no need for them to even switch the source of water in the first place. There is no need. So just that one mistake created this problem. But one thing I normally tell people is, you think Flint is a huge problem? Wait, Washington DC water crisis was a huge problem in year 2000. And so what happened was that in Washington DC, they were having increased coliform bacteria in the water. So now they talk among the experts, so they increased the number of free chlorine in the water to bring down the level of coliform bacteria. And in the process, what happened is, inadvertently, the process of increasing the free chlorine led to the mineral coating of the water line, okay? And it dropped the background pH. And the lead, remember, lead is very sensitive to pH change. And lead was formed at the surface of the coatings. And so later on, they stopped using chlorine and they replaced chlorine with chloramine, because CDC was concerned about chlorine, products becoming carcinogenic in people. So they changed to chloramine. And when they changed to chloramine, guess what? The chloramine just washed all the lead into the water. So, and there was lead in the water. But they didn't even know until Mr. Edward, a professor, Mark Edward, who was a civil engineer at Virginia Tech, was testing the mud, the water mud, and found very, very high, lead in those water, and raised the alarm. And after he raised the alarm, then there's everybody was running around to see where's the problem. And this led to many problems. People carry placard protests, across the country. So now, there was a study that was done in 2004 that found that, the number of children in the affected homes, rose from about 2.8 to 7.6%. So if you compare Flint and Washington DC water crisis, the Washington DC water crisis is far more. You can see, more than 100, microgram per liter was found in the water in Washington DC, compared to less than 25 in fleets. Okay. So, but there are other water crises that we will not go into detail. Greenfield and Durham in North Carolina in 2006, they also experienced lead in the water supplies when they were using alum to reduce water turbidity, which was the traditional method to remove the turbidity of water. But they switched to ferric chloride. But because they switched to ferric chloride, that interferes with anti-corrosive treatment they were using, leading to lead leaching from the pipe into the water. Then the same thing in Jackson, Mississippi in 2015. The water pH was fluctuating, and because lead is very sensitive to pH, it's led to the increased corrosiveness of the water, and there's this increase in lead in water lead level. So now, I want to talk very briefly, because I know we might have physicians among us. How do we do epidemiologic assessment of lead, lead exposure? So there are 4 components: exposure assessments, hazard assessment, risk characterization, and risk management. So if we look at exposure assessment, I think the first thing for us to assess the exposure to lead, we need to look into a municipal drinking water system and encourage the municipal to do at least 1 test annually to test for lead in water. And if we find that lead is above the actual level of EPA, then we're supposed to initiate what we call the biomonitoring, for people who are living in that area. So we have to look at whole blood level. Remember, I told you the resident time of lead in the blood is about 30 days. And we have to even, consider looking at the bone lead level measurement. And the resident time of lead in bone is about 10 years. So this is very important. This is the way we do exposure assessment. The hazard assessment, I already told you that lead has, toxic effects on human health, and lead is associated with intellectual and other neurologic deficits. But it's very important to say that 2 major publications, Lamphere and colleagues, they look at the IQ, decrement, and they associate about 3.9 when lead increase, in the blood from 2.4 to 10. So if lead in the blood is from 2.4 to 10, then the IQ of such child would drop by 3.9 points. That's what it means. Then, Brown and colleagues also found that when the blood level is greater than 2 micrograms per liter, okay, there's a 4.1-fold increased risk of attention deficits, hyperactivity disorder. But I need to say it again, that the actual level of 10 micrograms per liter set by the CDC is not an indication, or even the 5 micrograms per liter is not an indicative of a threshold of safe blood level. No, 0 is our goal. Okay. So the risk characterization is very difficult to do risk characterization, because people are exposed to lead in different sources. So what we normally encourage physicians to do is to consider all sources of lead, especially when they are talking to their, to their patient or their client. And the last one is the risk management. So, well, we need to have a threshold for lead, but that threshold has not been established already. That is yet to be established. But homeowners can reduce exposure by either replacing the lead pipe or shoulder, or by adjusting the chemistry of water. When they replace the lead pipe, that's a permanent solution, and that's very expensive anyway. But we can also do what we call corrosion control. It is cheaper, but it does not address the problem permanently. Or we can do what we call flushing of the pipe by running the water. So I always advise people, when you wake up in the morning and you know that your pipe, the piping in your house is too old, what you're supposed to do is allow the water to run for at least 5 minutes before you use the water. Before you use the water. Although at the back of our mind, we think that's like wasting water. Well, it is true we are wasting water, but it is also true that you are protecting yourself from lead, contamination. I think that's what I want to, talk about today. The takeoff point today is let's still continue to be a source of problem in our community today, especially in homes that were built before 1978, where they still use the lead paint, or in an area where the service line is made of lead piping or the coatings are made of lead. Right now, there is no threshold that is safe for children or adults. The goal is to, to achieve zero level lead in blood or water. And we should continue to raise the awareness because so many people don't know that lead poses a danger to us. So I want to thank, Daisy again. And I want to thank Tariq Rahman for, sending email to me. And I want to thank everybody who is here today. And these are the references in case you want to read more about it. I can send my email address and my contact information in case anybody wants further, information about lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alamu. That was fantastic. So we do have a question that's come in from Cheryl Ann. What effect does lead have on the body or joints when it gets into the bone?
Well, people actually have, studied lead and bone before, and they found that lead can, interfere with the cartilage formation, at the joint level. So therefore, the person probably may experience, arthritis or something like that. So lead has effect on, in fact, lead has effect on thinning of the bone. The bone density decreases, when lead, gets into the bone. So the bone is susceptible to fracture. That's what the literature says.
As a follow-up to that, so if someone was exposed to lead when they were younger, could they have like problems later on in adulthood because of that exposure?
Yes, that's a very good question. If somebody is exposed to lead, let's say at age 5, that can have, effects on them later on in life because lead stays in body. Lead bioaccumulates in the liver, in the bone, in the kidney, and the brain. So there's a problem later on. But the good news is the body also has natural mechanism by which it can remove lead from the body. So unless lead gets into the bone, the one in the blood, the body can get rid of the lead in the blood within 30 days, and you can't find the lead again. So that's good news for us.
But the damage can be done once it's already been.
That is very correct.
Right.
Yeah, the damage at times is irreversible.
And then we have another question here actually to, so Sharon had a second question, but similar to Brandon's question here, what type of filter is ideal for filtering lead from faucet water?
Well, according to the EPA, there are some specifications that they recommend, which I don't know the sizes, but the EPA do recommend some faucet sizes that have the filter, that you can use. The filter, to be honest with you, the filter is not per se to remove the lead, from the water, but to chelate, because there is some coatings on surface of the filter that can bind to the lead so that the lead do not come into the water when we are collecting it. So that means you have to collect your faucet sometime and remove the filter, otherwise the filter will clog, okay? So that I cannot remember the pore size, but yes, it is recommended to use, especially if you know. It is not necessary in areas where there are no lead service line or where there is no lead solder, okay, in the pipes. But if there is lead solder in the pipe or there is lead in the service line, then the best bet is to have lead filter, and they have specific pore size for it.
And is there a way to tell if you do have, if your water's coming from a lead service line, or you have the lead solders?
Yeah, so the two things you can do. Number one, you can call the water supplier, and they will tell you whether they use their service line as lead. Number two, if the color of your water changes, then that's, especially if the color of your water is turning brown a little bit, that's an indication that you probably have lead somewhere, seeping through. At times when you wait, you run the water and the water comes out, you see that they are brownish in nature. So that's lead. That's lead on its own. If you see any other color, that's not lead.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, but
it's nice to have a visual cue that something's wrong, though. When you can't see it is when it's scary,
yes, yeah.
So we have a question from Tariq. He says, thank you very much for your presentation, Dr. Alamu. Can you tell us what is being done towards achieving the goal of zero water lead levels or blood and lead levels, or what could be done?
To be honest with you, we have to give a lot of kudos to the United States government through the EPA and CDC. They have done what I believe is, everything humanly possible. They have, set the standard level to 5, but effort is still ongoing. People are still collecting evidence. The problem is you will need a lot of money to achieve zero level. That means we'll have to replace all the pipelines in the United States with non-lead. That means we have to figure out all the lands, everything. We have to remove all the lands that are contaminated with lead. Then we have to stop lead type of battery that we're still using today in the car automobile. Then we have to stop using lead as a shield in the radiation plants. So to achieve zero level is probably in our own generation is impossible. But we can strive to continue to lower the standard until we get to that point. We still need more evidence, from the literature for us to warrant to reduce it from 5, to 0.
Any other questions? I did have, I was just wondering, maybe with Flint, we might not see it yet, or maybe we do, but with the Washington, D.C. crisis and the others, have there been any studies looking at long-term effects of these children who've been exposed or following, kind of a longitudinal?
Yes. So one good example is a study in Canada that was instituted, probably before Flint's problem. And they were following, almost about 900 to 1,000 children to see whether that they will have problem in the local area, rural area. There are other studies in the United States too that did a longitudinal, and they found, increased, effects in children who constantly are exposed to lead. Okay, but they find that if you remove a child from lead invested area and you go to area that is clean, the child recovers, the body recovers very quickly, and the organs repair itself. So that's good news. I know of a fact that two studies going on right now, one by the University of Iowa. They were looking at the effect of lead in rural areas in, very rural Iowa. I don't know what they will come out with yet. And that, project is being led by my former professor, Patrick Osanusi and Peter Ton. So the two of them are looking at the lead level. Dr. Ton is actually a member of the EPA advisory task, force, on lead. We are still trying to understand the effect of lead in human beings. It's so complex. It's very, very complex. Because the reason why it's complex is there is no one single source of exposure. So there are different sources of exposure. That's the biggest, problem. So to quantify the exposure is a big problem. If we can quantify the exposure very well, then we will know the outcome precisely, okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A lot of thank yous in the chat for an informative presentation, very impactful, informational presentation on lead. Yes, I agree with everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Alamu. I learned a lot. We've done a couple of these. This is the fourth one, and there's some overlap, but now I understand that the water itself can cause lead to, I didn't understand, yeah. So that's very helpful to know. And yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and just close the session here in just a moment. Just a couple of last minute announcements. Just so everyone knows, last week was National and International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. So you can find more information on our resources page on our website. Also, the NSU Alvin Sherman Library is one of our partners in promoting this web series and virtual exhibit. So if you do live or work in Broward County, you can apply for an Alvin Sherman Library card. It's free, and you will have access to resources and get notified about events and programs like this one. And a big thank you again for everyone who attended, for your questions. A special thank you to Dr. Alamu, as well as the committee members who helped organize the event. Please visit lib.nova.edu/lead for information on this Friday's event, recordings of past events, and resources. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.